Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 128.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
And I'm here now with Adrian Granados. Adrian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
You are the rock star in our wireless world. You know that.
Well, that's what they say, but...
That's what they say, because you give us some of the best tools we have. So I thought it'd be good to, I've done a couple of podcasts on how to use your tools and thought, why not get the man himself right on the podcast, and we can talk a little bit about your tools, your development process, and if there's anything cool coming in the future.
Sure, yeah, that'll be great.
So how did you get started in writing Wi-Fi tools?
Well, it was back in 2009. I was doing some research in ad hoc networks with some small computers, and I needed to have I needed to find a clear channel to set up my ad hoc network, and I had this Wi-Spy, the very first version of the Wi-Spy. And I thought,
the MetaGeek one, yeah.
Yeah, the MetaGeek one. And I thought, it would be cool to have like an iPhone app to display, the channels and stuff. So I started looking for one for the iPhone. I didn't find any, so I thought on coding my own. So I came up with this iPhone app, like a Wi-Fi analyzer type of app, and then unfortunately got pulled out from the App Store because of the restrictions Apple had on Wi-Fi scanning in iOS.
Yeah, we're all really sad because of that.
Yeah, so I decided to kind of do the same thing, but for the desktop version. So that's how Wi-Fi Explorer started. Yeah.
It's a good start, and it's had a really good run now. You also have two other ones that I think all three of yours should be on everyone's Macintosh. In fact, if you're in wireless world and you don't have a Mac, you might want to get a Mac just to come up with these. So it's a Wi-Fi Explorer, and the Pro version is out now. Wi-Fi Signal should be in your menu bar all the time, and Air Tool for doing data capture. So let's go through your development process on how'd you go from Wi-Fi Explorer, a scanner, and over the last couple of years, I've seen the scanner to get more and more sophisticated. What was kind of your plan? I mean, you just started with a scanner. It's much more than that now.
Yeah, so at the beginning, it was kind of targeted to home users, but then I got more involved in Twitter and reading conversations of Wi-Fi, professionals and stuff, and then I started attending the WLPC conferences, and I saw there was this need for kind of a more professional tool with more advanced settings that home users wouldn't even have a clue. So, and that's how, for example, AirTool also started, because I remember it was a presentation from Ben, what was his last name? He made Ben Miller. He made a
Dallas, yeah.
Yeah, in Dallas. He made a presentation about doing captures in macOS, and he was using the command line. So I thought it would be nice to have like a little tool sitting on your menu bar that you could just hit, click and get a capture. So that's how AirTool started. At the beginning, it was just a little menu, but then it started getting more and more sophisticated, even though it's still a very simple tool and, just for quick captures. And
well, you've kept augmenting it when other people say, well, can you make a link to this? Or like Brian Long asked to have it linked to a Python script, and there it goes.
Yes, and that's something I'm always I'm happy to incorporate suggestions and feedback, but I'm always very cautious in the sense that I don't want to, make a very huge thing and that has a lot of options, because that makes the tool very, it's not easy to use anymore. It gets confusing. So, but you can
hide things there.
Yeah, so I try to make them simple when you start the tools, like very simple window, very simple menu, but there are more advanced settings that you can always turn on Like, for example, in Wi-Fi Explorer, all the columns that you can have, I mean, many of them are not visible by default, so you have to go and enable them. But that's pretty much the idea. Like, have very simple windows, very simple options, but then you can go and enable more sophisticated features.
Well, and I like that. It's a good way to. You can have a simple interface or a more complex one if you know what you're after and looking for. So of those tools, while I got you, you have to answer me because you're on a podcast. Any way to get in Wi-Fi signal the graph to be MCS index rather than the RSSI that shows up now?
Yes, you go to.
So I can get it to plot, but can you actually change the graph that shows up on the kind of the drop down, the horizontal line? So if you have a really stable SNR, you get a dead flat line.
Yes.
Yeah, I just like to see MCS there instead, because some people are like, it doesn't matter, and then you watch it just jumping all over the place, and you realize that it's more important.
Yeah, I think you can only set it to graph the signal strength, the data rate, and the. Let me see. No, you can do signal strength, signal to noise ratio, data rate, and MCS index.
Oh, well, I just didn't find it. I'll have to go and try it again.
Yes.
So anyway, good point there. You've adapted. I also like on Wi-Fi Explorer that you can, even if you don't have a packet capture, just Wi-Fi Explorer alone lets you look into the beacons and see some of the details that are there. That was a great addition you added there.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most liked features. Yeah, having been able to just have a quick look at the beacons and the information elements. Yeah.
Well, some people have asked me as I was showing it off in class or something, they're like, well, how come channel utilization doesn't show up for every AP?
Yeah, that's something that sometimes users get confused because they think it's Wi-Fi Explorer computing the utilization, but it's actually, the tool is actually pulling that information from the access points, more specifically from the QBSS load information element.
And some APs just don't show it.
Yeah, some IPs, they either don't support it or they are not configured to advertise it. Yeah.
So I wish they all were, because it's a nice statistic. Your website, adriangranados.com, and we'll put a link in the show notes for that, has a lot of good blog posts about your processes and how you've calculated some things. But can we just talk a minute about your Learn tab? One, you're doing these concept maps. What's the app you use for that?
It's called CMap Tools. I actually worked on that tool back in 2002. So when I came to the US, that was the tool I was working with. It's called CMap Tools, and it's for building these knowledge models or concept maps. And in my website, you can find a bunch of concept maps I made on Wi-Fi, like, for example, on the physical layer and MAC, control frames, data frames. And I made those while I was studying for the CWAP certification.
Well, I've taught CWAP a lot, and I think you went on overkill. You don't necessarily need to know all of those things, but it does give you a nice graphical way of seeing how things are interrelated, and that Wi-Fi is actually really complex.
Yeah, I kind of wanted. I agree it was overkill, but I kind of wanted to have like the whole picture of all the features and characteristics of the protocols and stuff.
So what's the best way to get these into? I mean, they're a nice graphic. But if you wanted to not use the tool, can you just dump them to PDF, or do you have to use the tool to be?
Yeah, so underneath each thumbnail in the web page, there is a link that says SVG high resolution. You can click there and you will get an SVG that you can export to PDF or print in high resolution.
It has lots and lots of detail in it. Well done. So how did you prepare these? I mean, this is like reading the standard or books, and just this is kind of the way you take notes?
They're pretty much based on the study guide for the certification.
From the CWAP study guide?
Yeah, so I started by pretty much listing concepts, like, for example, Mac header, frame body, um, address field, things like that. So you start listing those concepts, and then you start linking them to illustrate the relationships between them. Yeah.
And there's a lot of complex relationships in this world that we have. Even just just a single one on management frame is huge, because
Yeah.
management frames have a lot of those things going on. So, recommend if you do want to study and see how the interworkings of 802.11 work, especially for a CWAP study, Adrian Granados' site /learn has these mind map kind of looking things that are really useful to understand that. Thanks for getting those out into the community.
No, I mean, you're welcome. It was.
So did they work
I
for you?
enjoyed, yeah.
Did they work to help get CWAP done?
Yeah. Although, as you said, they are kind of, if you are not careful, you can get it's a bunch of information. So.
Well, which is okay as well. Yeah. So Wi-Fi Explorer Pro, I like the Pro version. The instant it hit, live, it was go pay Adrian money. It's easily worth the $80 to get on there. Plus, you can switch to dark, and show up the dark side. What was your impetus between making just a standard version and a professional version?
What was my what? I'm sorry.
The reasoning behind that.
The reasoning. Yeah. So I wanted to include more professional features in the original Wi-Fi Explorer, but it takes time, and although I'm not my first goal or my primary goal when developing this app is not money, but it still takes time and stuff. So I wanted to get some being able to get some revenue for adding more features. And at the beginning I thought on just having in-app purchases, but then it was getting very complex and annoying, so especially for the user.
Well, I think it's easily worth the $80 to have a tool. I probably use it on a daily basis on a whole bunch of different ways. I've started adding the new Spectrum interaction with it, and that's it's a whole new way to see the same thing that's going on at the same time. But it's kind of tied to the resolution of the Spectrum device that's sitting behind it.
Yes, yeah.
So currently, what different spec-ends can you hook up to this?
So you can hook up the MetaGeek 2.4x and the DBX. And actually for the DBX, in the latest update, Wi-Fi Explorer supports dual band scanning. So the DBX is dual band, but originally you can only scan either 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. Now you can scan both at the same time, even though it's still alternating between bands. But
it still gives you more information than.
Yeah, it gives you and then you can also use the RF Explorer, which is the handheld.
The one from Nuts About Nets, the little handheld version.
Right. And the HackRF.
So we had HackRFs at WPC in Phoenix. Is there anything special you need to do to your HackRF to get it to talk to to Wi-Fi Explorer Pro?
No. There's nothing special. Although the only issue with it is that the scale is a little bit off, because RF gives me values in the unit dBms. So there is the scale is a little bit off, but still you can see the shapes and the activity in the RF environment. Yeah.
That's a nice extra feature. So if you're running this, you can just install it from the Apple Store.
No, unfortunately, that cannot be. The Pro version cannot be published in the App Store because it cannot be sandboxed. So you can download it from my website, and it's signed by using my developer ID. That's pretty much
That's sad. I like having things all show up in the App Store, but I understand the situation, and you're accessing certain features that Apple just doesn't like. So we're kind of stuck in this mode where we are now. You also have another version. It's SetApp. What's SetApp?
SetApp. Yeah, that's a subscription service that the guys from MacPo started, and it's pretty much you pay $9.99 per month, and you get access to. Right now, I think it's 101 apps, and Wi-Fi Explorer is one of them. Yeah, so you can, but it's the standard version. It's not the Pro version. Yeah,
But
so
you can get the standard version from Apple Store anyway. But
Yeah.
you don't want the standard version. You want the Pro version because there's so many more cool things in there. Well, what's the future holding? You've developed Wi-Fi Explorer, then onto Wi-Fi Signal, which, by the way, I think everyone should have always in your, up in the menu bar. And then AirTool for those who want to do data captures. Is there anything that you're working on that you can share with us in the future?
Yes, I started working on a new app, but it's pretty much like a face to air tool. I'm coding like a protocol analyzer type of app.
Oh, they'll actually do decodes.
Yeah, so it's given a user interface to air tool pretty much.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to that. So it'll be tied to AirTool, take a capture, and then it'll do analysis at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it will let you do captures and do some analysis and graphs of the packets, retries, and stuff like that.
Ooh, you have me interested. Some of my favorite statistics to look at when I'm doing troubleshooting is retry rate, the actual flow of retries, as well as, of course, you're going to get CRCers, and compare those two. But also, what's the average data rate being used? Watching the average data rate climb and fall when I make different changes is a very useful way of, one, checking the health of the network. Two, you can make one change, like say change MBR from 12 megabits to 24. And if the retry rate goes down and the average data rate goes up, then it was a good decision. If it's the opposite, then we probably should take the MBR back to 12 again. But right now, I've got to use a packet capture tool to come up with those. It'd be wonderful to have just a fairly easy, just look at the screen and say, what happened?
Yes.
All for it. I'll give you lots of support to pull that off.
Because we have for Mac, we don't have that many protocol analyzers. Pretty much just Wireshark.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the other one we have?
But Wireshark, is designed for any type of network and supports many protocols. I want something that it's specific to Wi-Fi.
And easier. It's pretty tough to give to newbies and say, just fire up Wireshark and find this one frame.
Yeah.
Because you kind of know what the filters need to be to pull up the statistics. So if you just make it so it shows me answers rather than questions, that's a good thing to do.
Right. Yeah. That's the idea. Yes.
So is this year or kind of a 2018 kind of thing?
No, it will be 2018.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
Yeah.
Well, if it's ready around February of 2018, it might. I know a place you might want to have an announcement.
Yeah, that'll be nice, but I don't think it's gonna happen that soon.
I can always ask and dream.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a chance here now to talk to this entire audience. And what would you tell them what they should do with your tool to, one best thing that you think Wi-Fi Explorer is good for troubleshooting? I mean, a lot of people just use it as a scanner, but what can you use? How can you use it to also troubleshoot?
Well, it can be used to troubleshoot channel planning and channel configuration, like channel width and security settings and different other settings like for hotspot 2.0, because you go to the advanced details and you can get a quick look at the information elements for different features, even for example dynamic transmit power control for Cisco, or the pass point features and stuff like that. So it's pretty much you go there, you launch the tool, and you quickly can see what's going on in the network. And then of course you can launch more specialized tools for protocol analysis or spectrum analysis.
Well, since I've got you, I just wanted to thank you. You've done a great job in service to the community, giving us really good tools. Not to mention, you also came up with a really cool logo and T-shirts.
Yeah. It's fun that I like the AirTool logo a lot more than I like the Wi-Fi Explorer one. But
I didn't even know Wi-Fi Explorer had a logo, because I haven't seen it in a T-shirt. So I've seen lots of guys wearing your AirTool T-shirt. But yeah, it makes a little more sense. I think a lot of the AirTool also fits a lot of people's life. They go out with the tool and they fix the Wi-Fi. So that seems to fit. It's available if you just go to Teespring. We'll leave a link in the show notes as well of where to get one of these T-shirts. But thanks for putting that out and letting everyone borrow it as much as possible.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, and thanks for your time and talking to us today a little bit about your tools. Highly recommended, and we look forward to seeing your tools in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And, any questions or anything, you can always contact me at Twitter or my website.
And the website is?
www.adriangranados.com.
Very good. And you're Adrian Granados on Twitter. Thanks for your time.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Tools Review.
Hello, this is Keith Parsons again, and I thought for this little section in the podcast, I'd talk about a little thing I presented at some amazing locations called the Churchill War Rooms in London a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to some folks there who, scary, but they weren't using Twitter. They weren't using Slack, and they were wondering how to be engaged and work with this community of wireless professionals that we have that's very vibrant and active. And they're like, I didn't even know, and how do I get started and all that? So I just presented a single slide with some talking to it, and I went, that actually might make a good thing for a podcast. So here we go. It's on the show notes. You'll be able to see it. It's how to engage with community. Well, I came up with this idea. It doesn't take very much at all. And someone said, I'm kind of afraid. I don't want to get involved. I mean, I don't know what to say or who to talk to. So the first thing is you have to get yourself on Twitter or on Slack. There's a WLAN Pros Slack account run by Manon. And I think Sam, and both of them are the leaders of that. Or just get on Twitter. Either way, get yourself a Twitter account. If you want to know who to follow on Twitter, you can go to the WLAN Pros website. Under resources, there's a Twitter follow list. Go read about the people who are there, pick a couple. And here's the trick of how to engage. First, when you have an idea, some question, go ahead and just ask it. Ask very specific help. Go out on Twitter, and to the people you're following and who follow you, ask a simple question that you need some help on some very specific issue. You will get responses. You may get a bunch, or you might get only one or two. And so what you need to do at that point is take the information they give you. Don't do something really dumb like ask a question that you could just Google your own answer. If it was Googleable, they'll just send you that whole "let me Google that for you" logo. Instead, ask a question that that you've already tried to Google and you still can't find the answer. And then with the input they give you, it could be they give you a URL to go follow up on or some tricks that they've used. Then you need to report back. Let them know that you asked for help. They gave you help. This is what you did with it. And thank them for helping out. So you want to have a little bit of engagement there. And then here's the really good trick to make it even better. Take that information that you went and learned. You did have a question. You got some answers. Type it up. Go put up a blog. I keep telling people for years, just blog. It will change the whole arc of your career by becoming a blogger on your own. And so blog the answer, and then take that answer and share it back with the community. And so it's kind of a little circle there. You ask a question, you get feedback, and then you blog it, write it, codify it, put it into something logical, and then share it back with the community. And then all you got to do is rinse and repeat. Do that over and over again, and pretty soon you will be someone that people will want to talk to, engage with, because not only are you asking for help, but you're taking that help and turning around and giving back to the same community.
10 Talks.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. This presentation is going to be on understanding the full data path for Wi-Fi engineers. My name is Chris Avants. I'm a senior instructor. I was doing the WI design course here this week, and I teach for a living, teach about 40 weeks a year. I go all over the world, love what I do. But this particular presentation is about understanding the full data path, right? So understanding RF and Wi-Fi is key, but understanding the full data path is completely now required. New technology is always coming and changing, and bottom line, it's not enough to point fingers anymore, right? So you get them pointing back at you, right? All right, so Cisco has this thing called Enterprise Campus 3-layer design model. How many of you are familiar with this? Core, distribution, access. This is where most of us wireless engineers live, right? So down here at the access layer, but it's a good idea to understand some of these other layers as well, because they all impact the data path. They all impact the end user experience, which is what we're designing for, right? So APs aggregate to the switch, access aggregates to distribution, distribution aggregates to core. Seems like we're all comfortable with this. Surveys are, of course, great, and they're required, okay? One way or another, you got to do surveys, and everybody knows that. People have different approaches. We spend time learning. For example, see the presentation I did yesterday on experience. We talked about that, talked about getting in the practice, right? Practice makes perfect. Find what works with surveys, but be open to new ideas. So let me ask another question. Would you guys feel comfortable doing a survey on a project, whether it's greenfield, brownfield, walking in and knowing nothing else about the architecture? Is understanding just the RF alone, is that good enough? No, not at all, right? So for example, if you're designing for location, if we put the APs in the correct locations, is that all there is to do with that? We know location services requires a correct RF design. AP's got to be put in the correct place, and then the fun begins, right? You got to import the maps into Prime, CMX, and that's not really a small or easy job to do that. Calibrate, and then vendors also have specific latency, sizing requirements, depending on the type of location, the amount of traffic between your controllers, all those kind of things come into the picture, right? So a little bit larger picture, you've got several new different type of controller deployments, controller designs, right? And for example, again, Cisco. I've done a lot with Cisco, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But Cisco has one architecture called Unified Access. There's 5 different deployment models under the one architecture, right? So you could be deploying APs for centralized, flex connect, autonomous, lightweight, centralized, converged cloud. But what about your IDFs and MDFs? Where's your cabling going to? Are you sure that cabling supports that particular environment with the distance, the correct category of cabling? And then what about the uplinks between the switches? Between access, distribution, and core, right? What also about the data center layers? WAN availability. If you go and put in new Flex Connect APs, is that going to oversubscribe the WAN? What if you're not doing Flex? What does that do to your WAN, right? These are all different thought processes that come other than just RF design, right? And what about all these other network protocols that are in play now, right? And then this scary new concept of SDN. How many of you guys have actually done an SDN deployment? A couple of you for Wi-Fi? Is that part of it? Or just for the wired network? Yeah. So, you know, the truth is that every network designer's goal is good quality of experience, right? And there's a lot of variables that affect that. So I was talking about IDF and MDF locations. You know, some images are worth 1,000 words. Some images are worth no words at all, right? So our APs, as said, within 100 meters of the closets. Do you have the access port real estate? Do we have required PoE? There's a lot of variables there, right? How many different flavors of PoE are there? You guys know? 5. There's standards, and then there's vendor proprietary versions as well, right? So lots of different things there. And then not every switch has PoE on every interface. Some switches, you may get a 24-port switch and only 8 ports have the PoE, right? And then it becomes also what type of power modules are you using in the switch. All those things come into play. What about adding additional APs? Is that going to strain already strained uplinks? How many of you actually do like some type of net flow collection or SNMP collection of uplinks whenever you do wireless deployments? That's good. That's good. Check cabling. Use AirCheck G2, something like that, to make sure the cabling's good. Sound? Yeah. Good deal. Those are all important things, right? It's just kind of an overview that, you know, sometimes at scale, it seems like we deal with the RF only, and we place the APs, and we may work with some switches, and we may make sure our controllers have HA in the data center, right? But there's a whole lot of different ways traffic flows throughout this network. Many protocols that are also in use in these networks as well, right? So do you need to understand them all? Do you have to understand them all? Well, you don't have to necessarily understand them all. You don't have to necessarily program them all, but you do need to understand the full traffic path, right? From where the user connects and gets their access, throughout the entire network. So how many of you are familiar with this service block concept and service block design? It's similar to that 3-layer design, right? With service blocks, of course, you got different skill sets for each of these, right? If you're doing wireless all the time, you're probably not going to be a master at like Nexus 7Ks. Those are data center switches, right? Probably not a master maybe at firewalls. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But you still have to understand where that traffic path is flowing through the network, because bottom line, as we said, people point fingers. And the very first finger they point is that where they're connected for access, right? The wireless. So centrally switched APs or the split MAC design. All of us are really familiar with this. Controllers at the head end. AP managed by the controller. Security at the central site. Simple redundancy techniques, not much to it, right? And then like we said, Flex Connect. You have a lot of different options here with Flex Connect. Could be centrally managed, could be centrally switched, could be locally switched. That happens on a per WLAN basis, right? So how many of you guys have done the Flex Connect style of deployments? Whether it's Cisco or not, yeah? How many of you called in to troubleshoot Flex Connect deployments? Yeah, lots there. Every AP's got to be aware of the VLANs and the WLANs are terminating, right? So there's a whole lot more to it than just placing the APs and getting the RF right. Now we've got these new cloud and hybrid deployments, right? So cloud and hybrid, like for example, we know Meraki's there. There's several vendors out that are doing cloud now. But a lot more enterprises are also doing hybrid integrations where they're using ICE for everything, that one policy vision that Cisco has. And they're also doing it for their branch offices through the cloud, right? Integrating it with the Meraki platform. Anybody been involved with this type of deployment yet? Yeah. So again, it's not just RF, full data path. So where I'm kind of headed with this is, you know, what about all the protocols that are involved? We've talked about Wi-Fi, we've talked about RF, we know our data rates, right? We've mastered that part. Probably all familiar with CapWAP and what that does. We also have mobility messaging, Ethernet over IP or CapWAP, depending on the code we're using, right? Depending on if it's converged or AROS based, depending on which vendor you're using. And then what about the security protocols? Most of us master those as well because it plays along with wireless. So that could be .1x, Radius EAP, WebAuth, all of our ACLs, things like that. And then what about the application requirements themselves? That's a big variable. I don't even have to ask for hands to be raised. How many of you have configured VLANs, trunks, spanning tree, all that kind of fun stuff? So those few protocols, yeah, we think about those, right? But also what about like HSRP, Ether Channel, LACP, FHR, QoS, AVC? It's a lot, right? A lot to master. This is just a few of the layer 2 protocols that are out there. So whenever people say, oh, I'm good with layer 2, I'm like, you're good with all this? Yeah, you may be, but there's a lot. And it's repetitive. We got to do the same thing over and over again, right? So all the sites, we need segmentation. We need the switches to work without creating loops, right? We need redundancy. We need first hop redundancy. We need all that kind of stuff to plays a role. And that's really where this new SDN thing is coming in, right? So we're actually going to do a live presentation on SDN today, but was having some issues with that. But this is where, kind of we're headed. This is what's next. Because all those repetitive things we were just talking about, all those 60 protocols at layer 2, that wasn't even layer 3. There's just access layer protocols, right? So layer 3 is a whole nother animal in itself as well. But bottom line, if you haven't heard about this SDN, how does it change your RF designs? How does it change your AP designs? Anybody know? RF, it doesn't. No matter what type of architecture or magic the vendors are using, nothing's going to fix bad RF, right? So that's still there. That's good news for all of us, right? So this doesn't fix poor RF designs, but as far as the wired side, several things are changing, right? The switches from access distribution and core are now going to be running all the same code, and they're going to be managed centrally. One central application to push down all the application requirements across the enterprise. And that's including to the controllers, right? So as an administrator, you would just identify which applications are important, and it will take care of all those protocols we listed out and then some, as well as your layer 3 protocols, your high availability protocols, you name it, right? So only the allowed and selected applications receive the priority and receive that functionality, but those mundane tasks we've been doing, like creating VLANs and trunks and Ether channel and just all that type of stuff and spanning tree and everything else we've been mentioning, soon will be all going away. Now, is this tomorrow? For most organizations, no. We got a ways to go for this, right? But this is definitely where it's headed. Yeah. Those things aren't going away. It's just going to be hidden things that we don't necessarily have to do. But it also opens up a whole new bunch of possibilities for people, right? How many of you have taken any type of programming class before? Enjoy it? Somewhat, a little bit. Not all programming is the same, right? How many of you have tried Python? Okay, so Python, I love Python. It can definitely make things simpler, but it is next, and it gives you new forms of integration, and there's new consulting opportunities in this area as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the demo of the APIC and everything here. Wasn't able to connect to it, but if you guys want to see that, definitely ping me, and I'll be happy to pull that up. So, the takeaway for this without the demo is keep in mind the full data path and all that's going on, especially if you have to support Wi-Fi. No technology can fix poor RF and Wi-Fi designs. Site surveys are, of course, still just as critical as ever. Several deployment architectures now, you need to learn them, right? Not everything's centralized anymore. If you don't understand the architectures, the protocols, where they begin and end, see the experience presentation I did yesterday, right? Of course, networks are evolving. The new opportunities in SDN I just kind of mentioned. Most companies are still years away from refreshing this or at least adopting a full SDN solution. And if you haven't programmed and you want to know where to get started, there's now more places than ever. Like Microsoft has this Learn to Code platform. It's free. You just sign up and you can pick a few classes to take it. There's several of those resource centers out there. And if you're brand new, I recommend Python for beginners, because that kind of plays into the SDN experience and architecture. So that's what I got.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.